Hey everyone, Cole here with Dialtune, and today we are talking recording techniques. We're going to show you what it sounds like to record drums with one mic, two mics, four mics, or a lot of mics. And we're going to focus specifically on the snare at different tunings. There are a lot of mic technique shootouts out there already that show you, what an overhead setup sounds like and what a Glenn Johns setup sounds like. But they often don't talk about drums being at different tunings and going for different sounds. It's very common if you're going for a more modern, like produced sort of sound that you might tune the snare lower, and that might require a different sort of mic setup than if you're going for something that's like a little more open and a little more natural, maybe more old school like Zeppelin or Beatles, which might require fewer mics. What's cool about the Dialtune snare is that I can show you its full tuning range really quickly with all of the different mic setups. So you can see, once again, what does a really low tuned snare sound like with just one overhead mic? Or, what does it sound like really high if you have all of the mics going? And does that make a difference depending on what sound you're going for? So let me walk you through the mic setups that you're going to be hearing. First of all, if I only have one mic, usually I'll do a single mono overhead right above the snare, about 39 inches up directly above the snare drum. If you have two mics, you might go with a Recorder Man or a Glenn Johns setup. What we've got here, adding the second mic in, this is more of a Recorder Man setup where I have it equidistant from the snare, same distance as the overhead mic so that they stay phase coherent, so that the snare doesn't move off to one side or another or get out of phase. And I make sure that that is also 39 inches away from the snare. Both of these overhead mics are Lauten Audio LA120s, which are really affordable and very accessible. If I have the option to use a couple more mics, I will close mic the snare and the bass drum. I've got the classic SM57 on the snare, and I have a Slate ML2, which actually emulates other microphones just outside the bass drum. Just for fun, I've also got a bunch of other microphones. I've got some room mics, I've got close mics on the toms, and I'll also show you all of the mics in versus those 1, 2, and 4 mic setups. The room I'm in right now is fairly neutral sounding, meaning that you're going to get a pretty honest depiction of what you might expect to hear if you try any of this at home. I have some sound treatment in here. This isn't a huge room. It's not a super small room. It's not super dry. It's definitely not super lively sounding. So it's not like I'm in some big fancy studio with a huge room and you're going to expect it to sound like that. This is pretty much what it would sound like if you record at home. So first, let's hear the entire tuning range of the snare with all of these different setups, and then I'll show you some grooves at a few different tunings. So hopefully that helps you decide what miking setup you need for your situation. Maybe you were surprised at how much you could get out of just 1 or 2 mics, and then even just adding the kick and the snare, really how much you can do with that. As a general rule of thumb, the more modern, kind of punchy and produced sounding you want your drums to be, the more you might rely on the close mics. So adding that kick and snare close mic will allow you to do a lot more and make a quote unquote more modern drum mix. Adding all of the other mics is cool, but sometimes we fall into this trap thinking that a recording, isn't going to sound good or doesn't really count if we don't have 16 mics up at all times, when in reality, there are many decades of great drum recordings that were made with just a few microphones. So let us know which is your favorite. Thanks for watching. See you next time.